Hello and welcome back to Big Ten Under 10 on the Hoosier Network. Graham Nash, Adam Oppenheim with you again, and we're going to jump right into our recap of women's sports in the Big Ten. Women's basketball is back in the Big Ten. Here's how the first games panned out. The third-ranked USC Trojans barely squeaked out an early win against the 20th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels. Trojans win 68-66. Speaking of USC's, Michigan fell to the top-ranked South Carolina Gamecocks, but they kept it close. Final score was 68-62 South Carolina. The 5th-ranked UCLA Bruins took down the 17th-ranked Louisville Cardinals 66-59, and Rutgers defeated the Manhattan Jaspers 85-79. Those were the close ones, but now let's get to the blowouts. The 25th-ranked Indiana Hoosiers took down the Brown Bears 82-60. The 23rd-ranked Nebraska Cornhuskers took down the Omaha Mavericks in a little cross-state rivalry 88-48. Penn State beat the Bucknell Bisons 90-68. The Oregon Ducks beat the Cal Baptist Lancers 93-63. The 18th-ranked Maryland Terrapins took down the UMBC Retrievers 74-32. Minnesota beat the Central Connecticut State Blue Devils 89-48, and Washington beat Seattle University 89-53. Lastly, 3 games were played on Tuesday night. The 14th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes beat CSU 104-69. Michigan State crushed Oakland 107-42, and Wisconsin took down Wright State 95 to 68. Oh, Adam, lots of scores there to talk about. So let's focus on the top-ranked teams from the Big Ten. What did you notice from those teams?
Well, it was USC. They were able to escape against Ole Miss, but people forget Ole Miss, they're a top 25 team coming into the year. Kiki Iriafen, the transfer from Stanford, is going to be huge to pair with Juju Watkins. They need a little more time to gel with their chemistry, but USC, who are going to be the 3rd and 4th option scorers for the Trojans, that's going to be huge. And talking about South Carolina, they escaped against Michigan, but this Michigan team, they're talented. Silas Swords, highly ranked recruit, scored 27 in her debut game. They have Jordan Hobbs back. This Michigan team might finish in the middle of the Big Ten, and that's not even a bad thing because the Big Ten is the strongest conference for women's basketball this year. I would almost guarantee it.
Yeah, especially with the addition of the Trojans and the Bruins.
Right, the Bruins, not even mentioning them. They're going to have a terrific season.
Yeah, and you were on the call for an Indiana basketball game. How did they look?
Indiana looked good. A little bit of struggles, especially defensively, allowing the three-point shot. The thing for Indiana, they lost their all-time leading scorer, Mackenzie Holmes. But can they shoot the three effectively? They were 5 for 20 against Brown. They were number 1 in the nation in three-point shooting. So that's going to be the key as the game of basketball continues to expand. Who are going to be the best three-point shooting teams? Those teams will be near the top of the Big Ten.
It's only 1 week in, but already a little bit of drama. Let's keep it on the courts as we shift focus to volleyball. 2 Titans in Nebraska and Wisconsin clashed last Friday in Madison, and Nebraska swept the Badgers 3-0. The Cornhuskers would also sweep Northwestern on the road, and the Badgers bounced back by sweeping Illinois in Champaign. Penn State swept Michigan and beat Iowa in 4 sets. Unranked Washington beat the 12th-ranked Oregon Ducks 3-2 in Seattle, but the Ducks would respond by sweeping the UCLA Bruins at home. Ohio State swept Iowa and beat Michigan State in 4 sets. USC swept UCLA in the battle for Southern California, and the Trojans also beat Washington in 4 at USC. Indiana won 2 road games, sweeping Maryland and beating Rutgers in 4. Minnesota got a pair of sweeps as well over Michigan and Michigan State on the road, as did Purdue, who swept Maryland and Rutgers on the road. Our final score from the past week, Illinois beat Northwestern in 4 sets. Adam, again, lots of scores, but we're starting to get down to it. A lot of losses, a lot of big losses. What do those mean specifically for Wisconsin and Oregon?
Well, the Wisconsin losses certainly could be looked at as big, but it could also be looked at as Nebraska's just a tier ahead of everyone else. Yeah. You talked about it last week. Nebraska, they've lost a total of 4 sets and 12 Big Ten matches. That is unheard of. Winning on the road, not easy. They've been able to do it this year. Penn State, of course, still doesn't have a loss, but they're going to face Wisconsin in the coming days. As for Oregon, they did beat Washington early in the season 3-2, so you're not as worried if you each grab a match, especially when it comes to being at home. But the key I'm looking at is the hitting percentage. Nebraska's right near the top of the Big Ten. The hitting percentage is heavily favored Washington in the game that they won against Oregon. That's a lot of times what it comes down to is, can you avoid those mistakes at the net?
Yeah. Well, that Big Ten tournament, it's coming up. It's going to be a fun one. Now, we've been on the hardwood for too long. Let's touch some grass and talk about women's soccer, which is now in the postseason. The 15th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes beat Wisconsin 1-0, but would lose to the 5th ranked USC Trojans 1-0 in LA. The 8th ranked Penn State Nittany Lions took down Minnesota 1-0, but would lose 1-0 to UCLA. Lastly, Rutgers beat Michigan State 2-1, and Iowa drew with Washington 0-0. Women's soccer is now in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, with USC taking on Rutgers and UCLA taking on Washington. Adam, 4 teams remain battling it out for the Big Ten tournament. Who do you have winning it all?
Well, it's going to be a boring pick, but I'm going to pick USC. Last time they lost, September 8th, 2-1 at then number 1 Stanford. I think UCLA would be the biggest challenge to them. They won 1-0 early in the year. But this USC team, they're so explosive. They're so fast. They can score. Their defense is hard to get through. There's so many reasons to like the Trojans. I would have to put USC 1 and then UCLA 2, two of the newcomers in the Big Ten.
UCLA dominated in the Pac-12, and now USC, they're challenging them in the new Big Ten. So the last sport of the day that we will get to is field hockey. University of Massachusetts took down Rutgers 2-1, but the Scarlet Knights responded by beating Michigan State on the road 2-1. Michigan State would also lose on the road to Indiana 1-0. Northwestern beat Ohio State 2-1, but Ohio State bounced back with a dominant 7-1 victory over Central Michigan. And lastly, Maryland took down Penn State on the road 4-2. The field hockey Big Ten tournament begins November 7th and will last until November 10th, so be sure to tune into those games. And that will do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Huge thanks to Colin Dusick and Jesse Witt behind the cameras. And be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at B1G_under10. And check back in next week for our next episode of Big Ten Under 10.